In the autumn of 1989, the tranquil town of Danby, Vermont, was shaken to its core when an elderly couple was discovered murdered within the confines of their home. This tragic event left the community in a state of unease, prompting residents to cast wary glances over their shoulders and meticulously check their door locks each night. Early in the investigation, state police identified a suspect. However, the evidence against this individual was primarily circumstantial, with only a solitary drop of blood failing to provide definitive proof. Consequently, the harrowing double murder remained a mystery for over 3 decades, until 2020 when the case was reopened, fueled by the hope that advanced forensic DNA analysis could finally unveil the long-hidden truths. Every day, without exception, 76-year-old George Peacock would procure a copy of the Rutland Herald from a local store in Danby, Vermont. His routine was so ingrained that when George failed to appear on Wednesday, September 13, 1989, and the days that followed, it raised eyebrows among the townsfolk. Equally concerning was his absence from his part-time position at the Rutland Travel Lodge on Sunday, September 17th. George was known for his punctuality, working diligently 3 days a week from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and he never missed a shift or appointment. The desk clerk, sensing something amiss, reached out to Lorraine, a friend of the Peacocks who was visiting from out of town and staying at the lodge. Lorraine, too, had not seen George or his wife, 73-year-old Catherine, in recent days, but she assured the clerk that she and her husband would visit the couple's home later that day. Upon arriving at the Peacocks' charming red 1.5-story residence just off Route 7, Lorraine noted their car parked in the yard and a light glowing in the living room. Yet, despite the visible signs of life, all the doors were securely locked. The Peacocks were known for their meticulous attention to security, so it was not entirely unexpected to find their home tightly sealed, even if they were inside. However, no one answered her persistent knocks. Lorraine was acquainted with her neighbors, Jay and Faith, so she decided to visit them to inquire about George's whereabouts. Unfortunately, they too had not seen him since he had mowed his lawn on September 13th, which felt like an eternity ago. Concerned, the trio made their way to George and Catherine's residence for a more thorough investigation, peering through the windows and calling out to the couple. As Jay glanced through the front door's window, he was met with a chilling sight. George lay motionless at the foot of the stairs. Without hesitation, Jay dashed to the Peacock's car parked in the driveway, discovering it was unlocked, which allowed him to retrieve the garage door opener. This enabled him to access the house through a basement door that appeared to be either unlocked or lacking a lock entirely. Jay swiftly led the way, descending to where George lay. It was painfully evident to him that George had passed away. Remembering that Catherine had been unwell recently, Jay hurried up the stairs in search of her. Upon entering one of the bedrooms, he found Catherine lying on the floor, also lifeless. Alarmed, he shouted down to Lorraine, urging her not to proceed any further. They exited through the kitchen door and promptly contacted the authorities. The Vermont State Police arrived at the Peacock residence around 9:40 that morning. Detective Sergeant Robert Jalbert observed that the home had several exterior doors, all securely locked except for the kitchen door that Jay had opened to exit. There were no signs of forced entry. Upon examining the scene, Detective Sergeant Jalbert discovered George lying almost face down, slightly turned to his right with his legs curled in a semi-fetal position at the foot of the stairs. A large pool of dried blood lay beneath him, and it was evident that he had suffered multiple stab wounds to his chest. The evidence suggested that George had engaged in a fierce struggle with his assailant, beginning at the top of the stairs and continuing downwards until his tragic demise. The back pocket of George's trousers, where it was presumed he kept his wallet, had been violently slashed open. The wallet lay discarded on the floor beside his lifeless form, appearing to have been rummaged through. Investigators discovered Catherine's purse in a different part of the residence, which also bore signs of having been emptied. However, aside from these items, the house showed no signs of a thorough search for valuables. Jewelry remained undisturbed, closets were intact, and dresser drawers were left unopened. Crime scene technicians noted a bloody footprint on the carpeted staircase leading to the second floor, along with blood spatters adorning the stairwell walls. They also found blood on both sides of a door that opened into the bedroom where Catherine was discovered. This room seemed to serve as a storage area, cluttered with an assortment of items, including several plastic bags filled with clothing and a stack of particle board planks in one corner. Catherine bore visible stab wounds to her chest, yet there was no blood present on or around her body, nor any indication of a struggle. Her attire, bra, sweater, and cardigan, showed no signs of knife marks. Detectives concluded that Catherine had been overpowered by her assailant, subdued, and then repeatedly stabbed. Once the scene was meticulously processed and secured, the bodies of George and Catherine were transported for autopsy. The medical examiner classified their deaths as homicides, determining that Catherine succumbed to multiple stab and incised wounds to the anterior precordium, directly affecting her heart, liver, and diaphragm. She exhibited bruising on her temple, the bridge of her nose, and near her left kidney. George, too, met a similar fate, suffering from multiple stab wounds, including 7 to his chest that inflicted damage to his ribs, sternum, lungs, diaphragm, liver, and other internal organs, alongside injuries to his scalp, hands, back, and more. The forensic analysis revealed that the instrument of murder was likely a slender, single-edged knife or a double-edged variant, measuring approximately 5/8 of an inch in width and slightly exceeding 4 inches in length. The examiner posited that the assailant struck Catherine and George from a position behind them. Notably, George's autopsy uncovered hair strands clenched within both of his hands, while additional fibers were discovered on the carpet beneath his lifeless form before his removal from the residence. These strands were meticulously collected as crucial evidence. The autopsy findings indicated that the peacocks had been deceased for several days, coinciding with the last confirmed sighting of George tending to his lawn on September 13th, alongside the most recent edition of the Rutland Herald, dated the same day. Further inquiries revealed that George had failed to attend a scheduled medical appointment at 3 p.m. on September 13th. As news of the tragic double homicide circulated through Danby and the wider Vermont community, the scant details were both unsettling and concerning. Diane Darby of the Burlington Free Press reported a recent spate of break-ins in the vicinity, prompting residents to secure their homes with heightened vigilance, fearing that the deaths of George and Catherine were the unfortunate outcome of a botched burglary. Jay, the neighbor who discovered their remains, recounted that he had intensified his security protocols, stating to the publication, "Everyone's armed." Law enforcement remained non-committal regarding the possibility of burglary as a motive. Rutland County State's Attorney James Mongen emphasized that all avenues were being explored. However, behind the scenes, the investigation was coalescing around a compelling theory, suggesting that the events were anything but random. George and Catherine were the proud parents of 3 adult daughters, all of whom traveled to Vermont with their spouses to confer with investigators on September 18th, the day following the grim discovery of their parents' bodies. The police informed them that they were considering each individual as potentially knowledgeable about the homicides. While it was clear that certain friends and acquaintances had access to the Peacock residence, these individuals were seemingly excluded from any involvement in the tragic events. Given the absence of forced entry, investigators surmised that George and Catherine had willingly admitted their assailant, likely someone who appeared harmless when they knocked on the door that fateful day. Authorities conducted interviews with all the daughters and their spouses, discovering that the last visit to Catherine and George occurred approximately a month before their untimely demise. Their middle daughter, Penelope, affectionately known as Penny, along with her husband, Michael Louise, had traveled from their home in Liverpool, New York, for a week-long stay. Penny recounted that they made the 3.5-hour journey in their 1986 tan Chevy Celebrity. However, when they returned to Vermont on September 18th to discuss the murders, they were seen in a rental vehicle. Michael, employed at a car rental agency at the airport, often opted for a larger vehicle during visits to accommodate Penny's children. This time, however, he expressed a preference for a rental, not due to the children, but out of concern that their car might fail, citing a problem with the struts. Approximately 2 weeks into the investigation, police received tips regarding vehicles observed in the Peacock driveway around the time of the murders. Yvonne Daly of the Rutland Herald reported that authorities were on the lookout for a light-colored, square-backed vehicle, a description that intriguingly resembled the 1986 tan Chevy Celebrity driven by the Louises. Investigators maintained communication with the daughters of the Peacocks during the initial weeks of the case, reaching out to Penny on September 28th to update her on their progress. Detective Sergeant Brian Abbey informed her that they were searching for a tan vehicle that had been spotted at her parents' residence around September 13th, and their next step involved acquiring toll records to further their inquiry. When the term toll records is mentioned, particularly in the context of the United States, one might instinctively think of highway tolls. Penny shared this assumption, unaware that the detective was referring to records of long-distance phone calls. Court documents reveal that Penny and her husband, Michael Louise, shared an exceptionally close bond. A witness noted that they had a mutual circle of friends, were always aware of each other's activities, and communicated openly about everything. Consequently, Penny relayed the detective's information regarding the tan car and toll records to Michael. It was immediately apparent to her that he was unsettled. The following day, Michael Louise vanished, leaving behind a troubling note for Penny. This note conveyed a sense of emotional turmoil, with Louise expressing that his nerves are shot and that he was struggling to think or sleep properly. He later confided in family members about his intention to seek psychological counseling, likely as a means to manage the overwhelming pressure and suspicions directed at him. Louise became a person of interest in the investigation after witnesses reported seeing a tan vehicle near the Peacock's home on or around the date of the tragic events. In October 1989, Penelope Penny Louise permitted investigators to examine her husband's car, where crime scene technicians discovered a small drop of blood on the driver's side floor mat. In 1989, the nascent field of DNA technology was insufficiently developed for authorities to analyze a sample of such magnitude. The evidence was preserved in a freezer at the Vermont Forensic Laboratory. When interrogated, Louise initially refuted any presence at the Peacock's residence during the time of the tragic events. However, he later altered his narrative, asserting that he had intended to visit the home on the Wednesday, preceding the discovery of the bodies to retrieve some old particle board. Allegedly fatigued during his journey, he decided against the visit and returned to New York. His alibi was tenuous, yet the absence of definitive evidence prevented law enforcement from making an arrest. In May 2020, Truex, the lead investigator, sought to have several pieces of evidence from the Peacock double homicide re-examined. A laboratory report dated October 15, 2020, confirmed that the blood belonged to George Peacock. Armed with this newfound evidence, authorities secured an arrest warrant for Louise, now in his late 70s, apprehending him at his residence in Syracuse, New York. His advanced age and health complications posed challenges during the arrest and extradition process, yet the warrant represented a pivotal moment in the investigation. In 2022, Michael Louise was formally charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. His arrest provided a long-awaited sense of closure for the Peacock family and the community that had yearned for justice for decades. Despite the compelling evidence against him, Louise steadfastly proclaimed his innocence, insisting he had no involvement in the murders. His advanced age and health issues have further postponed the trial, and he remains under supervision with restrictions as the legal proceedings unfold. Susan Jane Berman was a distinguished American journalist and author, born in 1945 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As the only child of the notorious mobster David Berman and the former dancer Betty Ewald, who graced the stage as Gladys Evans, she came to terms with her father's significant involvement in organized crime later in life. Tragically, in 2000, Susan was discovered murdered in her residence, a case that remained shrouded in mystery for over a decade. It wasn't until 2015 that Robert Durst, a real estate heir and her longtime confidant, was charged with her murder, culminating in his conviction in 2021. Susan's upbringing unfolded in the vibrant cities of Las Vegas and Hollywood, where she mingled with notable figures such as Jan Wenner and Liza Minnelli during her time at Chadwick School. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of California, Los Angeles, in 1967, where she first crossed paths with Robert Durst. 2 years later, she completed her Master of Arts in Journalism at the University of California, Berkeley. Throughout her life, she received a substantial sum of $4.3 million from the Mafia, compensating her for her father's interests in various casinos and properties. An accomplished novelist, Berman authored 2 memoirs and a college guidebook titled The Underground Guide to the College of Your Choice in 1971. Her first memoir, Easy Street, vividly recounted her experiences as the daughter of a mobster. In the 1970s, the William Morris Agency represented her, engaging with several Hollywood producers who expressed interest in adapting her memoir into a film. Although the movie rights were sold for an impressive $350,000, the anticipated project never came to fruition. Berman once endeavored to secure funding for a musical inspired by the Dreyfus Affair, a venture in which Durst chose not to participate. During her time in San Francisco, Berman contributed to various media platforms, including the San Francisco Examiner, Francis Ford Coppola's City magazine, the Westinghouse Evening Show on KPIX-TV, and CBS's People Show. She was also a valued contributor to esteemed publications such as New York, Cosmopolitan, and Family Circle. Among her notable works are Driver, Give a Soldier a Lift, and Lady Las Vegas, which accompanied the 1996 release of an A&E documentary, for which she co-wrote and received a nomination for a Writers Guild of America award. At the time of her tragic passing, Berman was collaborating on a project for Showtime with attorney Kevin Norte, titled Sin City, envisioned as Showtime's response to HBO's acclaimed series, The Sopranos. On Christmas Eve 2000, Berman was discovered murdered in her rented home in Benedict Canyon, executed with a 9mm handgun, and it was believed she had been deceased for at least a day. On March 14, 2015, Durst was apprehended in New Orleans under a first-degree murder warrant issued from Los Angeles. While authorities did not immediately disclose the identity of the presumed victim, the Los Angeles Times was the first to report his detention in connection with Berman's murder. 3 days post-arrest, Los Angeles District Attorney Jackie Lacey announced that, if convicted, Durst could face the death penalty in California due to special circumstances of murder of a witness and lying in wait. Durst was subsequently transferred to California and arraigned in early November 2016. Various accounts, including murder of a mafia daughter by Kathy Scott, have suggested potential links between Berman's murder and the 1982 disappearance of Durst's first wife, Kathleen McCormick Durst. Berman had become a confidant of Durst during their time at UCLA in the late 1960s, and later became acquainted with McCormick after relocating to New York. In a critique of Scott's literary work, True Crime Zine noted that investigators began to suspect one of Berman's longtime acquaintances, yet they have never succeeded in formally charging him with murder. Durst emerged as a key suspect in the mysterious disappearance of his wife and, after many years, was ultimately charged in connection with the case. Initially, Berman served as a media representative for Durst and is thought to have aided in crafting his public alibi. In 1982, she contributed a deposition to the investigation, a document that Durst later faxed to authorities following her tragic death. Throughout their friendship, Berman received substantial financial gifts from Durst, amounting to $50,000 in the months leading up to her demise. Her last correspondence to him, dated November 5, 2000, conveyed her hope that her financial requests would not jeopardize their relationship. Earlier that same year, the New York State Police, prompted by then Westchester County District Attorney Jeanine Pirro, reopened the inquiry into Kathleen's disappearance, with friends of the missing woman urging investigators to interview Berman, though this effort proved fruitless. Berman was murdered mere weeks after the renewed investigation garnered public attention. In 2015, an arrest warrant for Durst revealed a previously undisclosed typewritten letter sent from New York on January 9, 2001, to a police station in West Los Angeles, titled Possible Motive for Susan Berman Murder. This letter indicated that Berman had suspected Durst's involvement in his wife's disappearance and noted that he intended to visit her in late December. On September 17, 2021, Durst was found guilty of Berman's murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment shortly thereafter. Tragically, he passed away in prison just 4 months following his conviction. Berman now rests at Home of Peace Memorial Park in East Los Angeles, California.
On the 20th of May, 1987, 2 truck drivers were navigating their route out of Columbia, South Carolina, along Highway 378. As they traversed the quaint town of Hopkins, their attention was drawn to a disturbing sight: a body lying in a ditch adjacent to the highway, roughly a quarter of a mile from the entrance of the McIntyre Joint National Guard base. Without hesitation, they alerted the authorities. Upon arrival, the police were confronted with a scene of harrowing brutality. The victim was a woman, her life extinguished by a shotgun blast to the face at close range. It appeared she had met her tragic end at the very spot where she was discovered, her untied shoes lying nearby. Lacking any form of identification, she was ultimately recognized as 34-year-old Patricia Ann Green. A devoted mother of 3, Patricia resided in downtown Columbia alongside her children and sister. Unfortunately, the investigation yielded no leads, and the case quickly grew cold. Evidence from the scene was meticulously collected and preserved. The initial investigator assigned to Patricia's case was Bill Simpson of the Richland County Sheriff's Department. Just as he took on this case, he had announced his impending departure for a new role elsewhere. Although his involvement was brief, the haunting memory of Patricia's case would linger with him for the next 30 years. In 1997, the Richland County Sheriff's Department established a cold case unit dedicated to revisiting unresolved cases. By early 2017, they had successfully solved 10 such mysteries. Among the unit was Jeff Fuller, who had previously worked on violent crimes within the Sheriff's Department before leaving in 1988 to join the State Law Enforcement Division. Following his retirement, he returned to the Sheriff's Department to contribute to the cold case unit. In February 2017, Bill Simpson reached out to Jeff Fuller, requesting the unit's assistance in revisiting Patricia's tragic case. Even after nearly 3 decades, the unresolved nature of the case continued to weigh heavily on Bill, who remained troubled by its harrowing specifics. Jeff Fuller took on the challenge, and within a matter of weeks, the cold case unit would triumphantly close its 11th case. At the time of Patricia's tragic murder, DNA evidence was not a tool frequently employed by law enforcement. However, in 2017, investigators revisited preserved evidence from the case, hoping to uncover DNA that could lead to a suspect. Their efforts bore fruit when DNA was discovered on some of Patricia's garments, and a search through a criminal database revealed a match: 53-year-old Philip Johnson. Already serving 4 life sentences at the Kirkland Correctional Institution for the murders of 4 women in Sumter County, Johnson's violent history was chilling. His spree had coincided with Patricia Green's murder. 2 victims fell before her, and 2 after. Although Patricia's murder had not been linked to the others due to its location in a neighboring county, the connection was undeniable. Investigators from Richland County approached Johnson in prison, where he confessed to the crime even before being informed of the DNA evidence against him. He recounted details of the murder that only the true perpetrator would know. When questioned about his motive, he chillingly stated that there was none. Patricia Green was merely another life he chose to extinguish during his rampage. The resolution of the case was publicly announced by Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott at a press conference on March 8, 2017. Patricia's family was informed before the announcement, and while they felt a sense of relief at finally achieving closure, they chose to remain silent about the case in public discourse.